Don't let rampant politics and clusterfuckery ruin all your projects and your sanity. Smooth ugly penny lines and make it all make sense. Get experience by osmosis here on corporate under.
Hello, everyone. If you haven't been here before, welcome. I'm so glad you're here today. We're doing this live recorded version of what will become a podcast available to everyone everywhere. Today is Tuesday, February 25th, 2025, and I am Tamara Adlin. I'm your host. Corporate Underpants is all about the issues that don't get enough conversations, the real reasons why we have such a hard time developing and launching products people love. And mostly, I'm talking about digital products that people love. If you work in the world of product or UX or design or whatever, you probably often feel like no matter how good you get at your job, there's still tornadoes that come in from the side, that executives ruining things, somebody saying the logo needs to be bigger or the design UX equivalent. And I think a lot of us get to a point in our career where we realize, I may have to start learning how to deal with this. And that's what this podcast and this series of conversations is all about. I wrote 2 books on personas. Personas usually start with data. As soon as I wrote those books, I immediately started consulting and almost never using data first in creating personas because I found a bigger problem, which data can't solve, which is that important people, stakeholders, executives are not agreeing with each other and they're not realizing that they're not agreeing with each other. And even more than that, data can't get rid of really powerfully held assumptions by power people in positions of power in product organizations. That was a lot of peace. This interview I'm going to get to right away because a book recently came out called Aligned, and I have the co-author of Aligned, the fabulous redhead firebrand Melissa Appel, who wrote this book with Bruce McCarthy, and Bruce will be on in a different episode of this. Melissa, hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. So this is advanced alignment, everybody, because we're pretty much assuming if you're listening to this, you get the idea that misalignment is what causes corporate underpants, which causes products that nobody totally loves, and that mastering politics is a part of it. And alignment is what I believe, and I think Melissa also believes, is a solution to corporate underpants. First of all, who are you? Where did you come from? What did you do before? What have you been doing in your career?
So, I am a coach for product leaders. I work a lot with CEOs, especially at small companies as well, focusing on improving and maximizing the product function, but also clearly on alignment, stakeholder alignment, executive alignment. Before that, I spent 20 years in product management in B2B companies, various sizes and stages. And then I also wrote a book.
And then you also wrote a book. How did you know Bruce?
We actually met because we're both from Boston and we were on the board of the Boston Product Management Association at the same time, which is how we met.
And how did you get the idea for Aligned? When did you start it too? Like how many years ago?
So we started it in, I want to say like 2022. It took about 2 years to write and it came out last summer. So it was a book that I really wanted to buy and give to some people on my team, and it didn't exist. So there were 2 people on my team. One of them said yes to everything, even though they knew they couldn't actually deliver, which frustrated them and everybody else. And another person on my team said no to everything and didn't give a reason. And people came to me and said, why not? So this was originally going to be a book about how to say no to stakeholders. And then I said,
Oh.
who do I know that's written a book, a business book? And I thought of Bruce because he wrote Roadmaps Relaunched, which is also another amazing book. And I said, what do you think about writing a book? And he's, I think it could be more than just saying no. So that's when we got into the whole alignment.
Okay. And so then you used, and I know the history of this too. You started writing the book, you had a bunch of people read it, and then you basically rewrote it.
Yeah.
You want to tell a bit about that?
Yeah. So we had a bunch of people read it. They gave us some great comments. There was actually one key problem, which was that we had a lot of us versus them in it. So it was like, oh, those darn engineers, oh, those darn stakeholder salespeople or whatever. And that's actually the opposite of what we intended to do with the book, which is we're all on one team. We're all working together. We're working towards the same goals. We should collaborate and work together. So we completely rewrote that. But then the second part was that we had all these examples and they were short, right? And you can't really get to know somebody in a sentence or two. We decided, hey, it would be better to have a longer story arc where you actually get to know these people over time as you would in the real world. So that's how it turned into a half narrative, half explanatory.
I've been pestering myself to write a book about alignment for years. When I think back on the books that I've loved the most, they're the ones that have a bit of a parable on it
Mhm.
in them. Like Lencioni's Five Dysfunctions of a
Right.
Team, and there's a book called The Goal. And these issues are very human and have to do with communication in all parts of our lives anyway. And I think it's another argument for personas. People can relate more to
Yeah.
people than they can relate to, even fake people, than they can relate to theoretical stuff.
Yes.
And I love what you said about us versus
Yeah.
them, because I think that is also a really important moment. As we come up in our fields, us versus them is a really big thing. And it's a way that I think we glue ourselves together in our disciplines. Why aren't people listening to us in UX? Why we should be brought in earlier. We used to be brought in the early 2000s, if we brought in at all, to do usability tests, which is the baby cute or not, a little late.
Yeah.
I call it whining. We spend a lot of our time in each of our disciplines whining about other people not listening to us. And there's a moment where you have to realize, what if this was a problem I could help to
Mhm.
solve versus just bitch about?
Yeah, and not just whining, finger pointing, right? We're not selling because sales isn't doing a good job. No, we're not selling because the product isn't good enough. Oh, we're not selling because the usability isn't there, right? If only we're easy to use. And I think that's the wrong approach. It's not whose fault is it's here's where we are. What can we do about it? And a lot of that comes back to we're all on one team. Let's create shared goals and go after them together. Now we figure out, okay, what are you going to do? What am I going to do? Let's do this together.
Okay, but we've had goals in our industry forever. We've had OKRs, we've had KPIs, so I think an underlying part of this conversation too is we know how to launch good products, but we're not doing it. So something else is wrong, right? So there's great work on KPIs, on goal setting,
hmm
but there's something missing there too.
So what I found is that often even if there are goals that are set by the team, somebody is not quite in agreement. Somebody might be undermining it. Somebody might be setting their own, oh, this is everybody's goals, but our goals are going to be over here. And there's a tool that we outline in the book called mining for conflict, which is really getting at, okay, are we all in agreement? Can we go around and everybody say one reason why we think this won't work or why this isn't a good thing? And even doing that one on one, right? Not everybody wants to say, I disagree in a giant group. The one on one conversations in the background are also helpful to try to say, I feel like I saw a little bit of hesitation from you in that meeting. What's going on?
Okay, so then we start to get into all of the tricky parts of solving this. So there's one piece of good news, which is if you are in product, if you are in UX and design, then part of what got you to wherever you are today is that you decided it was interesting to think about users. It was interesting to think about the way regular humans experience what it is that you're building. The good news is that these people who are making your life miserable, believe it or not, are actually also humans. And so you can use some of the same tools on them, but it shifts you into almost being a product yourself with an interface that now puts you in a bit of a riskier position as you become more senior, because now we're basically saying you have to wrangle stakeholders, right? And not just react to them.
Mhm.
And that is way easier said than done.
Yeah.
Mark, he loves conflict mining. When you mine for conflict, you got things that were like monetarily valuable. You'd be living in a freaking mansion by now.
I found that the more advanced you get in your career, your job becomes stakeholder management because you're trying to set up your team for success. And that means making sure that what you're doing is working towards a common goal, that you're not going to butt heads with somebody, that you're not going to find any blockers. So you have to make sure that the whole system is set up to make your team, but also the whole company successful.
And you have a story. There's a big piece of this where you have a moment where you walk into your office and you realize that your assumptions about the sanity, for lack of a better word, of your senior team have been wrong. That they aren't as organized as they'd like you to think, that they aren't immune from defining the same word in different ways, that they aren't immune from, especially in tech, measuring each other's dicks every time they get into a room together, that they aren't immune from reacting to massive changes like, oh no, AI, now we have to be an AI company. So if they aren't, and we stop assuming that they've got all their stuff together, then it gives us an opportunity, a delicate, fragile opportunity to hone that conversation for them, to help them through it. You have a story. We had talked about starting with a little story of an example that you told me about discovering
Yeah.
this. Tell us the
Yeah.
story.
I had a client where they came to us and said, we have a delivery problem. Our teams can't deliver on time. I don't know what's going on. I think we need better agile practices. Help us figure out how to hone this delivery engine. So the problem that people present you with is not always the actual problem. Like we know this from all sorts of work that we do. We went in and interviewed a bunch of people, and it turns out that was really going on was that the team would come up with an estimate for a particular group of work, and the executives would say, "No, that's wrong. Do it in less time." And so the team was like, "Oh, okay, I guess it's gonna take less time?" And then they're like, "Great, I'm happy now." The executives, "I'm happy now. It's gonna take less time." And the team's like, "It's not, but I can tell you it is." And so they weren't delivering because they didn't feel safe enough to stand up for what they thought the actual estimate was. So the estimates were too low by design and they couldn't achieve it. So it wasn't really a delivery problem, it was a culture problem. And so you can look at the symptoms for a problem, but a lot of times it turns out that the underlying causes of a problem are people related, are culture related, are alignment related. And so digging in deeper there and be like, this is interesting, but like, why is this actually happening?
We always talk about the Henry Ford thing. If you had asked people what they would have wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And this is that it's this fractal approach that at every level in the organization, every level of product development and release, this is a problem. And this is an interesting problem for me because from 2005, people were calling me to ask for persona efforts. What I found out very quickly is that they were asking for a solution
Mhm.
to a problem that they didn't have the courage to speak, and they certainly didn't know how to solve. So I always say, like, they call and ask for personas, and I would say I would do them in a different way. I don't go out and get a bunch of research, and I say, "What problem are you trying to solve with personas?" And they say, "The truth is there's an argument between these two senior people on our team, and we just need someone to come in and solve the argument." Right? That also is true today, and it's also true in the whole challenge of bringing alignment into the conversation in our fields. It is a problem every team, every organization has. No one is shopping for it,
Right.
the solution to it.
Yeah.
No one is shopping for executive alignment for all sorts of reasons that are obvious, like we don't want to admit we're not
Yep.
aligned,
Yeah.
right? So it shows up in all kinds of it also shows up in job descriptions. Like, how many times have we all read a job description where we're like, what is this? What problem are they trying to solve? By the time many of us get exposed to an issue that we actually could help with, people have already made too many decisions about the right way
Or
to fix.
people do come with a solution, right? You talk about you're doing user research, right? You talk to people and you want to have these broad, open ended conversations like, hey, what are the problems you're encountering in your job? But then customers will come to support and be like, hey, I want this. And as user researchers, we're trained to say, that's interesting, tell me more. Or why do you want that? Or what is that going to solve? Or can you tell me when you're using that to try to get at the problem? And it's the same thing with kind of anything that's going on at work, right? We have a delivery problem. Interesting. How does that show up? Let's dig in a little bit more and see what's causing that. And it's not necessarily that people need to get better at delivery. There might be something systemic that's set up. And the same thing with your
So how did you
perception.
handle that? I mean, how did you handle that?
Yeah.
Were you successful in handling that?
We were working through it with sometimes you can only help people who want to be helped. Let's say that. And if somebody is resistant to change, there's only so much that you can do, right? If they just don't want to admit the problem. But in that case it was, listen, we need to trust the engineers that this is the amount of time it's going to take. If you want to reduce the amount of time, you need to reduce the scope, golden triangle, scope, resources, time, quality in the middle, that you really have to think through it logically and say, hey, this is why you're not meeting those estimates, and pointing it out in a delicate fashion.
A delicate fashion, yeah, and I think yeah, so Kim asked Kim, thanks for joining us. Melissa, curious what you suggest we do when there's a culture problem and changing the culture will take more time and effort than finding an immediate workaround, which, by the way, is 100% true all of the
Yeah.
time. It will always take too much time and effort, but go ahead. What
Yeah,
do you
I found that two-pronged approaches are usually helpful, right? So let's do something now to fix the immediate problem. Let's pad our estimates so that when they reduce it, it comes down to what it actually is, right? That's a kind of short-term workaround. The longer-term change is using a proof of concept, potentially saying, okay, this one team, trust them on their estimates. Let's see if they can deliver against those. If they still can't deliver against their estimates, maybe we're estimating wrong, maybe we're doing something. But if they can, then maybe we have a data point to suggest that we should change our process to trust the estimates that the engineers are coming back with. It's hard to change culture problems in general, especially if there are people who don't think there is a problem, which usually, there's often a power dynamic and the person in charge is, I don't see a problem. The other people are like, yeah, but we're going nuts over here. And especially if the culture problem comes from the CEO, from the top down, and you're somewhere lower on the chart, it's hard to change the culture of a whole institution. However, I think little experiments here and there and trying to carve out your own piece of the world is helpful to try to show what good looks like.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. So it's no surprise to maybe some of you are listening for the first time. My own process around that is what I've been calling align before design. It's the process of creating alignment personas, which are non-data driven to begin with. They're really about aligning the assumptions of key people in the organization. Some differences here are there's a different approach if you're within the organization. It gives you a different set of levers that you can and can't pull, right? So you are on the hook to do something immediate to assuage the problem because that's your job. But then you may also have an opportunity to prove the value of doing it a different way. And I say exactly the same thing. Start with something small so that some little team that nobody's paying attention to somewhere does this alignment process and they launch something that's better than anybody expected. When that happens, then there can become a pull because there's only so much you can push. You can't convince people to accept things that they're not ready
Yeah.
to accept. And also, me as an external person coming in having written books is a very different power dynamic than someone in an organization who is trying to improve or change the behaviors within that organization.
Yeah.
I think another thing that I'd love to throw in here is that I have become completely addicted to goals at multiple levels. And one of the things that I highly recommend for everybody is it's not just about the goals for changing this feature or whatever. It's also if you decide, let's say you decide to do alignment personas or any of the exercises in the aligned book, what are the goals for doing that exercise? So, how are things today? What's some proof of that? Oh, everybody's talking about users in different ways in documents. How do we want things to be tomorrow? Oh, we want everybody to use the same names. And how will we measure the change? This kind of goal for what is my goal for the exercise I'm doing as a professional right now also helps us with career development because in product and UX, if we do our jobs well, it often looks like we did something obvious.
Hmm. Yeah, good design is invisible, right? It just works, and so you don't see it. I wanted to
Yep.
mention something from that previous comment there. Sometimes there are just bad apples who want to blow up anything they didn't champion. So this is where the sort of playing the game and the politics comes in. If you need somebody to champion what you're working on, figure out what their goals are and how to tie your thing to their goals. There's usually a way to tie it in, because then they are championing it because it's achieving their goals. But you're not going to know what their goals are, or what their motivations are, what their incentives are, unless you do some research and hopefully talk to them, right? So we have a tool in Aligned in the book about stakeholder interviews, which are basically the same thing as customer interviews. You want to ask a few open-ended questions, figure out what is driving your stakeholder so that you can get them to become a champion.
And this is where it's worth reading books like The Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Lencioni, where there's this character Zed who is on the executive team, but is throwing a wrench into everything. So sometimes it's because there really is a bad apple. I have been in situations where when I dug into it, I realized that executive X was inept, and was inept in a way that many of us have seen inept leaders where they wake up in order to mess things up, in order to take attention away from the fact that they aren't really doing anything.
Yeah. I've seen people, especially somebody who's been at the company for a long time and started off maybe as an individual contributor and just sort of had these leadership responsibilities thrown on them. And they might be in over their head. They might feel embarrassed that they can't do what they're being asked to do. And they've been there a long time. So they're steeped in this outward mask of being able to do things. And they might be taking things into their empire because they feel like it should be their responsibility, but then they don't actually do anything because they're in over their heads. And so these kinds of people, in the book Build by Tony Fadell, he talks about, what's it called? He talks about two different kinds of assholes, basically. The one who's just an asshole and the one who is like motivated by the goals and feels like their behavior is actually the right way to go, even though maybe you don't think it is. So I feel like it's rare that somebody is literally there just to mess things up, like on purpose, just to mess with you. There's often a lot more going on that you don't see. Either they're embarrassed that they can't really do it, and so they're trying to hide behind something, or maybe
Yep.
it's even like something going, maybe they're going through a messy divorce at home. Maybe something else is going on, and that's usually more likely to be the case. You usually, I forget which thing it is, but you're more likely to attribute somebody's behavior to a personality deficit than you are to attribute it to context.
And this isn't a personality, but in the world of early stage startups, I joke that I'm a specialist for ADHD founders. And I actually say that with love. I think there's lots of people, there is a combination of factors that attract some people to start technology companies in the particular set of challenges that are attached to some differences in patterns of communications and expectations of working together and social cues and everything. There's just differences there. And so sometimes we come in as these people and like, of course we want to talk to people. We want to, blah, blah, blah. And then we're met with people who are just wired differently, right? And there's a different level, a set of problems. Like their puzzle is a different scale. They're dealing with the puzzle of the investors and the burn rate and all of these other things, plus their own challenges. All of us have challenges in communication. All of these things add up to either be a hairball or no, they always add up to be a hairball. And then the question is, can you start to help them untangle it without getting yourself fired?
Mhm.
And the answer is often yes, delicately, but yes.
I feel like it's easier to come in as an outsider than to come in as somebody within the ranks, right? Like
You
if
can't.
you're like 3 steps away from the CEO, you can't be like, "Hey, here's how I think you should run your executive team better." Like it's hard to do. Joel asked a question, how do you approach scaling what's working where you have leadership that's not fully bought in, right? It's anytime you're trying to enact something, you want advocates, you want people on your side. And if you can't get at the leadership right away, say you've done something on your team and it's working, maybe you share it with your sister teams. And maybe they start doing it. Maybe that starts working. And then maybe somebody sort of notices, hey, this set of teams over here is doing this thing differently. They're actually achieving much better results. Maybe we should use that and apply it to some other teams. And then you get this kind of groundswell. If it's really a better way of doing things and people are happier and you're getting better results, first you have to make sure to prove that, right? Like our products are better measurably. And then you have to share with your friends and then it becomes a thing. It's much easier to prove something than to just tell somebody about it. So you can't go to leadership and be like, this is a better way. They're like, okay, whatever, who are you? But it
And it doesn't
yeah,
have to be all that it doesn't have to be all that scientific. Like in my persona effort goals, which I ask people to do before alignment personas, it literally can be something like we're using 400 different words to talk about users. I want to bring that down to no more than
I
10,
created so many
right? And then
glossaries and let's
glossary is
oh my gosh, it's okay. This thing means these 7 different things. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to remove the word we were using and we're going to use actually 7 different words to mean these 7 different things. We're going to take away this word altogether because people have too many meanings associated with it. Let's
in
change
fact,
how we're
I
talking
will
about
go
things.
out on a limb. I will go out on a limb and say the one most powerful thing you can do to assess and start to deal with misalignment in your own organization if you work inside a company is to make a glossary. No one can tell you it's a waste of time. And so what you can do then is say, and you just go to your boss and you say, I'm making this glossary and I realized that when I asked 3 different people what the how they define the word institution for institutional investors, they said 3 different things. How shall I handle this? You're not going in guns
Right.
blazing. You're saying, here's an observation. I think this might be causing problems,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? And so you do things where, and you show it afterwards. I went ahead and created this
Yeah.
glossary on my own time over the
Yeah.
weekend.
You can also do it if you're a
And
new
they,
employee, it's for your own knowledge. If you're hiring or onboarding somebody, it's an onboarding document. There's lots of reasons to do this. I actually wrote like a 4-page paper at one of my companies defining what we meant by data. What does data quality mean? It's like data quality is like one of those things like, who knows, right? Is it frequency? Is it accuracy? Is it availability? Is it right? And so all of these things, people are just saying data quality. I'm like, what do you mean by that? And so I wrote up a whole thing because I'm like, I need to source this out for myself because I don't know what so and so is saying with data quality and this other person. And this comes back to alignment, right? They need to be talking the same language because if
like,
this person says data quality and this person says data quality, they mean 2 totally different things. They come away from a meeting with 2 totally different perceptions of what they were talking about.
I think that was one of the most powerful moments that I had in my career where I started to realize that if I was confused, other people were confused
They
too.
might not admit
It
it.
didn't even matter if it meant that I was dumb, which, by the way, I am not. It just means that, okay, if I'm having a moment of confusion, I can't be the only one. And so maybe I'll be brave enough to say that I'm confused, which then puts it on me. Poor Tamara is confused,
But
right? The
you
others,
don't even have
that's
to
what,
say you're confused in a big group. You can go up to somebody and be like, "Okay, I heard this thing. I'm confused. Do you mean this or this? Help me understand."
or you put it in an email and you send it to your boss in a way that they can easily forward it.
Mhm.
That's what I do. I think about the chain. So if I heard the word institution used in 2 different ways, I might write my boss an email and say, "Boss, I was in a meeting and it sounded like Jeremy was saying institution meaning like a government institution. It sounded like Beth was saying institution meaning like a family owned office that was like investing in things. And I'm obviously we can do either, we can do both. Can you tell me where, because I got a little confused. Can you help me out? Then my boss can send it to my grand boss and say, oh, actually, this is interesting. What do we want to tell them about this? And also Hans Borschall, who's going to be a guest on a future one, who owns this successful agency and has for years, coming in from the outside is really powerful because you can come in with the ignorance card. You can come in saying, I don't know anything about your organization. And you can ask some really fundamental questions. For me, when I come in to help teams, I always say, I need to know our top 3 business goals for this project. And they always say they can give them to me and they never exist,
Mhm.
right? It's different levers that you can pull from underneath versus from above.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. We have another comment here. Every leader should demonstrate what they are doing by assessing even the basics, then name a point in time to present your assessment and an MVP vision roadmap. It does help everyone align or feel comfortable having real talk to clarify things to the new person. Yeah, and I'll just say there, even the word MVP and roadmap are things that need definition in most
Absolutely.
organizations. Like we and then Suzanne says, I use my confusion tactically in classes to help others. Confusion is a tactical tool, right?
You don't even need to say, I get confused or I'm confused. You can say, let me get this straight. Or is this what we're
Yes.
talking about? Or I want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Or I'm noticing this and this, or it sounds like there were two different things going on here, or you said this and you said this, which when you wrangle executives, by the way, no matter what the problem, who the problem child is, and it's usually more than one, alignment is a really interesting skill to develop because I can teach my alignment process. Melissa and Bruce can talk about aligned in this genius book, but it is a very delicate skill to develop to do this without getting yourself fired. It takes some understanding of your own ego and how that's happening and understanding okay ways to
Yeah.
manipulate people and not okay ways. Like I give other people credit for my ideas all the time and tell them that they're really smart.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
There's a diagram in the book where we talk about how to say things in a less judgmental way. So there's the words and phrases that you use are important, right? And so I'm confused versus help me understand, right?
Yeah.
They might sound the same, but they can be taken in different ways. I'm confused as there's something wrong with me, and some people might not want to say that, but help me understand is like a request. So it becomes a different thing. And so if you want to understand like what's going on, you can start with something that's seems straightforward, like, why did you do that? But that sounds really accusatory. So you can say, okay, what caused you to do that? How did you end up doing it that way? What led up to that? Or just talk me through that decision. And so the difference between why did you do that and talk me through that decision are
Hmm.
immense, right? Because it's framing it a different way and it's presenting something different about me. It's presenting something different about you and it's putting you in a different sort of situation to be able to have that conversation.
And yeah, and actually, now that you say that, I'm confused. Suggests maybe you did something wrong. You weren't paying attention. Help me understand is actually, I am paying attention. I'm paying so much attention that there's some little detail in here and I really want it. I really want to know what that is. Suzanne, by the way, makes an excellent point, which is this is truly an excellent book, meaning aligned. I've not finished it yet, but it is
Thanks,
awesome.
Suzanne.
Yeah, I tell everyone that when I first saw Aligned come out, I basically wanted to cry and felt like I'd been stabbed in the gut because I had been thinking about writing a book about alignment since 2005 and not done it. And I got over that because I realized that you had actually started doing the work that was way harder than what I wanted to do, which is introducing this entire concept in a broad way into our field. I think this word is critically important. I think this methodology is critically important for becoming senior. I also think, and my stuff fits nicely in, right? Mine's a way to
Yeah.
do it, a workshop to do
I
it
mean,
that is sophisticated.
what you've been working on with the alignment personas is I think something we missed in the book, right? Like we talked about how to align on goals and how to align on strategy, right? And but we didn't really talk about how to align on personas. And I'm wondering if you can maybe talk a little bit about that because I think your methodology is really cool.
Well, you're clearly a very smart and in tune person, Melissa. Of course you got. No, thank you. This was huge. And so my response to feeling like I'd been punched in the gut was like, now I have to be best friends with Melissa. So I made that happen. And now I'm going to be best friends with Bruce and a rising tide buoys all ships. My thing is related to this. Alignment personas is also saying that the words that got you in trouble in the first place are not the words that you're going to get you out, even if you define them well. So, what I wanted to do, and I think instinctually did, was I wanted to change the conversation. So, anytime executives get in the room, they tend to have the same conversation over and over again using the same words. And what I wanted to do is find a way to depoliticize. And I knew personas could do that. I knew personas were genius, even though after writing the book, I also know why everybody started to hate personas. Because if you start with data, it's really expensive. You hang them on the wall and they don't work. The reason why they don't work, from my perspective, is because they are not more powerful than the assumptions that are in the heads of the people in positions of power who have been told they are right. They have been hired, they have been given money because they are on the right track in their brains. And Data explains what other people have done to solve a problem, not this great new idea that you have that may have nothing to do with data. So instead, I started asking them, what is a goal? You could be, and I call it business goals. And I've said this before, it's not business goals, but the word I chose is business goals because they can't say no. What they really are, what are metrics that will change in terms of usage of this product if our project goes well? But they can say no to that. They can't really say no to me if I say I need some basic business goals. Then I have them unpacked. What I really am having them do is barf out all of the users that are in their head. Because anytime you talk about a user, if there's dozens of users in someone's head, they can shift and be slippery. And first they're talking about this one, and now they're talking about the guy with the parrot, and now they're talking about the nurse who doesn't get to go home at night, and the next one they're talking about an astronaut, and they're all users. It's too slippery. The only way is to empty that closet, which is full of crap. You have to empty it out. And so that's what this process is about, is tell me everybody's that's in your head. Now let's shift it over to what do those people want and need? And now let's together mush those wants and needs into example people. What that does is it completely changes the vocabulary. And it says, we all agree that if we don't make Phyllis ridiculously happy in this next launch, we're not going to reduce the number of customer support calls we have. We just aren't. And we all agree we have to do that. So it's not about whether executive one or executive two is right or has a creative idea. It's that, how does this help Phyllis?
Yeah.
Now, again, they can change their mind and say it's no longer the goal, but then at least you'll know. So to me, it's introducing this new vocabulary that is around people that are using the product so that the arguments stop by asking what's best for Phyllis. And it tends to stick.
Yeah, I like this method also because, and I think it does tend to stick because it was a collaborative process to create it, right? If you hire a company to go off and do some research and come back with personas, you're like, great, that's nice. But when you work with people collaboratively to come up with something, they feel ownership in it. And they're like, oh, I helped come up with Phyllis. Clearly I'm invested. Like, I'm going to do what's right for Phyllis. And there's an example, a study we talk about in the book where there were like 3 use cases in like a manufacturing facility or something where they were doing a new process. One was they just announced the process and said, are there any questions? The second one is we announced the process. They asked for feedback. They made some tweaks. The third one was everybody worked together to create the new process. And you'd think that being able to give feedback on something would change how people reacted to it, but actually the present it, any questions, present it, have feedback were the same. It was the co-collaboration one where people were more likely to do the process correctly, were more likely to be happy about it, right? And I think that's what you're doing with the alignment personas is not just somebody went off somewhere and came back with something and now we have to accept it. It's we're going to work together on this. And I think that's important for personas, for goals, for roadmaps. And it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has an equal contribution, but everybody needs to be involved in some way to feel some ownership over it.
And they're getting out of the conversations they've had a million times because now they're talking about Phyllis and Fiona. They're not talking about the same things. So, and the other thing is, if you assume that I'm right, which I am, that everybody in a position of power has about 100 users in their heads, think about what happens if the personas are done by an agency. Now they have 110.
Yeah.
They don't replace them. They're additive, right? So that one use case, that edge case, when he was sitting next to that other guy on the plane who said, I tried to use your software while I was jogging and I couldn't use it because my smoothie fell onto my laptop. You had to get that guy the hell out of there. And the only way to get him the hell out of there and to show that he's not as valuable as any of the other ones is to get them out of their head, make them barf them into the light and talk about them and create them together, which is the antithesis of data. Accept that these assumptions that we poo are also based on a pretty rich understanding of the domain and the business issues.
Yeah.
So us being snobbish about them is not super helpful. The place data comes in is later where you can validate or invalidate them, and you have a chance of doing that. Okay, Joel says, I love the concept of stakeholder canvas in the book. Can you please share some practical advice on how product leaders can use this?
Yeah. So first of all, if you've read the book or if you haven't read the book, you can go to alignedthebook.com and you can download a copy of the stakeholder canvas. What I think is the most useful part of this is not the end result, it's the process that you go through to create it. So the stakeholder canvas is essentially you write down all your stakeholders and you write down stuff about them. Now, how do you find out that stuff about them? You probably have to talk to them. You probably have to do a stakeholder interview. You might ask somebody who's worked with them before or experience things in meetings and notice things. So I think that how product leaders can use it is that it forces you to get to know the people in the company, especially the people you're working with the most or the people who have the most leverage over whether or not you're successful, and getting to know them sufficiently enough to fill in all blanks in the stakeholder canvas. And that helps you understand what their motivations are and understand the points that you might have a connection with them, which kind of makes the whole thing a little easier.
Yeah, and I think what's great also about Aligned is that there's lots of different little things you can try that just really it just depends on your organization, where you sit in it and what you need. A glossary and a stakeholder canvas and an alignment persona workshop. All of these things work together. It's untangling what's really going on here internally in my organization that is vastly impacting my products, but has nothing to do with the double diamond, has nothing to do with the quality of the developers, has nothing to do with the sales team being good or
Right.
not good or selling
Yeah.
features that aren't.
Frequently, what I find when I speak with clients of mine who have difficult stakeholders is actually, I'm like, it's possible that your goals are different from their goals. And that's why you're not seeing eye to eye. Right. So if my goal is to improve,
It's so obvious.
right? It's obvious in retrospect, but if my goal is to improve to grow revenue and that person's goal is to maintain the size of their team, then we're
Right.
probably not going to be able to get anything done because they're not interested in growing revenue. They're interested in maintaining the size of their team and keeping their job. And so even if their stated goal is, yeah, I want to improve revenue, it's their actions might speak something else. They might actually have some ulterior motives that you can see if you look hard enough. And so,
And that can't not
yeah,
happen in an
yeah,
organization. Like, it's amazing we get anything launched at all because it's so and so my approach also over time, the reason it's collaborative is because I have to let them show each other that they're misaligned,
yeah.
right?
You
So
can't
there's
tell
little
them.
details.
You can't tell, like, you guys are misaligned.
No,
Let's get together and make sure we're on the same page about this before we move forward.
you can't do it. You can't do it. And so in a way, it's very useful to have written a book or whatever and we're bringing in this expert, right? And that's what happens. That's why you write a book is because you want a consulting career. So internally, these tools that you can use are at a different sort of, I think, subtler, one piece at a time. How can you get one small project somewhere to go better than it did?
Yeah,
And how can you capture the before and after, even just with a little narrative or a
yeah,
story that shows that something
yeah.
changed?
It's also permission to do something a little differently. And that's, or maybe just do it instead of ask for forgiveness, not for permission. But a lot of times, like somebody was saying before, use confusion tactically, right? To say, I know that our stated goal is this, but it feels like a lot of people are working towards this other goal. Maybe we have two goals. Can you help me understand?
Yeah. And yeah, both goals seem great, and maybe we do. But now that if we say we have two, is one of them worth 70% 130, or are they 50-50?
Right.
And then what I say is they can't be 50-50. They have to be 51-49 at least. And then doing little numeric exercises like that, where I say no two goals can have the same number. It's all freaking
Yeah.
arbitrary, except that it's not. It's just saying that if we agree on the goal of reducing subscription cancellations, but one of us says it has to be by 80% in 3 months, and one of us says it's a reach to get it by 10% in 3 months. We have to deal with that now early. We're not going to hit whatever number we choose anyway. It's completely impossible to totally hit
Right.
it. But if we're going after one is going after 10% and one 80%, and that's where it can hide, right? They all agree on the goal.
Mhm.
But man, it's a way different goal to go for 10% versus 80%.
Yeah.
So, this idea of also creating an environment in which everybody does feel like they were heard. You talked about it not being safe to disagree, right? There's also the problem of some people not speaking up in meetings There's all this sociological, psychological, organizational psychology stuff that starts getting triggered. And for me, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
For some of you, you're going to be like, no, I don't want to deal with this at all. But for those of you where you're like, oh, there's another puzzle here
Yeah.
that's,
And people
um,
call it like politics, but it's really just understanding people a little bit. Alignment versus agreement versus acceptance. I love this question. And I love the fact that you understand that these things are different. So thank you, Kim, for the question. Yeah. We define alignment as getting everybody to agree on the path forward. They don't necessarily have to agree with everything, but they have to be committed to following the path, right? That's like alignment. Agreement is like everybody is in full agreement. I can be aligned with something I don't totally agree with. This is just disagree and commit kind of thing from Amazon. This is the way we're going. I'm going to commit to that. I don't totally agree, but let's see where it goes. Agreement is like everybody is perfectly agreed on everything, which you're probably not going to get. You may need to do a little negotiation. I think acceptance is a little bit of that disagree and commit. Like, I'm going to accept the path that we're taking, even though I'm not 100% in agreement, because this is the direction we're going, and let's make a go of it together. So,
and
yeah.
there's also actual acceptance versus a show of
You're like,
acceptance.
yeah.
Yeah. But then the wrenches that, if you think about it, if you're developing a digital product, there are hundreds or thousands of tiny decisions that are made by everyone on the team every single day.
Mhm.
And tiny misalignments can then become massive issues because a little tweak here, a little tweak there turn into this. I picture racehorses who are attached to a chariot. If one is even going in slightly a different angle, the whole thing comes to a
Yeah.
halt and chaos very fast. And because we make so many decisions, we try to empower people who are developers or designers or whatever. If all those tiny decisions aren't made in some kind of alignment, we can't deliver great work.
Mhm. And not only do you have to align on it, you have to document that, right? It has to be written down. It has to be like, these are the goals. You have to repeat them all the time to make sure you're still in alignment. There's something in the book we call alignment decay, which is like over
Oh,
time, if you forget to update people or you don't talk to people enough, they either forget what you were doing, they think you're not doing it anymore, they aren't aligned anymore, but they forget to tell you. And so people go in different directions when you don't keep up with that. If there is an alignment on goals or whatever, it needs to be repeated early and often to make sure that that
on
alignment
every
sticks around.
that's one of the things. That's one of the blunt force tools I use. Every single deck, every single meeting, every single presentation starts with the top 3 business objectives and the magical sentence, which for me is, if our primary business goal is to reduce subscription cancellations by 80% within the next 3 months, we have to make Phyllis ridiculously happy. We have to, right? And so repeating that over and over again. The other thing I talk about is companies set goals at the beginning of the year. But anytime 2 or more stakeholders or executives are in the same room together, something shifts slightly and no one writes it down. And it is political suicide to be in a meeting of executives and raise your hand and say, I'm not sure I know what our goals are anymore. Given those things, no wonder nobody has clear goals. No wonder when I start the contracts, people are like, we don't, well, you can take that part of the contract that we have to come up with, articulate clear goals. We already have those. And I say, send them, and they never can because they're never, it's an emperor's new clothes thing. They can't exist. Clear goals and not exist. Yeah. Okay. So Marie says, what I'm hearing is that co-design has more buy-in than providing feedback. And I'm hearing that.
It's great. But what you don't see is all the shuttle diplomacy and the one-on-ones that have gone on there behind the scenes. So even if I'm working on a roadmap or something, I will first solicit inputs into that roadmap, and then I will put them down, and then I will say, is this what you meant? And then I will say, here's the version of it. What do you think? And so there's definitely feedback along the way, because you don't want stakeholders to create the roadmap for you. That's definitely not what you want. You don't want to, as a product person, at least, you don't want to give up control over the roadmap. But at the same time, you need to involve people and make them feel like it's their own, like they had a say in it, like they helped. Because if your stakeholders help you create the goals or the strategy or the roadmap, then they're bought in, then it's their idea too. And it's harder to disagree with something that you helped create.
Absolutely. And what one of my things that I say a lot is the alternative to alignment around assumptions is not alignment around data, it's misalignment around assumptions. So if you accept and bring into your brain and your professional self that misalignment is one of the most powerful negative factors and it can throw tornadoes through any project, right? If you accept that, then suddenly this problem of misalignment becomes a really fascinating thing to try to solve. And it isn't necessarily something that can be automatically solved. In fact, it can't be solved by things we solve. Things solve everything, like data. It just can't.
Mhm.
So we've got 5 minutes left, and I want to do a couple things. I'm going to have you back anyway because you're fucking awesome. But right now, today, one thing I want to talk about is so many of us are out there looking for work or thinking about quitting our jobs because we hate it or whatever. And I know that one thing you and I have talked about is something that you're working on, which is a pre-quit checklist. And how does that relate to this whole alignment
Yeah.
conversation?
People tend to quit jobs. The two biggest reasons people quit jobs is they don't like their manager and they have unclear expectations. And I think a lot of reasons why people are quitting these days is because of culture, because of people problems. So I would encourage people who are thinking about quitting to think about whether or not there are things that they can do to make the relationships that they have at work and the situation that they're in better. And I think some of those tools are curiosity, are stakeholder interviews, are finding out what people's motivations are so that, and by aligning with people on what it is that you're trying to do, because it's possible that their behavior, which is confusing to you, is actually based on something reasonable, usually is. It's just something reasonable that you don't know about yet. And
And so I'm
yeah,
going to put in a pitch for you here. The one of the many things that you do is you do coach
yeah.
people. So if you're a senior product person and you're trying to figure out what the fuck is going on in your organization and you think it might have something to do with this, then Melissa would be a great person to call because she might be able to help you untangle it. And in a world where nobody should be rampantly quitting their job right now, given the environment
Mhm.
that's out there, that maybe some of these alignment levers that you can push and pull might be really useful to you. You may discover that it's a problem you can't solve. In that case, either you do quit or you don't. And you just say, I'm going to relieve myself from the burden of thinking I have to fix
Yep.
this because it is an
Yeah.
unfixable problem.
Sometimes there are unfixable problems. Sometimes you have a big company with the CEO who's just not willing to change and fires everybody all the time. And like, you're probably not going to be able to change that. But more locally, there probably are things that you can do in order to clarify the remit of your role, in order to define roles and responsibilities of you with your boss, you with your engineering peer, you with, and there are probably things you can do to better understand why people are doing things the way they're doing, to better align what you're working on with somebody else's motivations. There's a lot of different ways that you can, and if you try everything and nothing's working, maybe it's not the right place. Maybe there's nothing you can do, but I think there are a lot of things that you can try before throwing your hands up and saying, "That's it, I'm out."
And that's what I do with someone with when I do coaching, which isn't all that often. Coming in from the outside and having this perspective of been looking at this problem across multiple companies, multiple situations, multiple projects. There are things that you can't see because you're in the middle. How else should people get in touch with you, follow you, see what you're doing next, and follow your gigantic brain around the planet?
You can connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn. You can check out the book at alignedthebook.com.
And I'll tell you that I have just loved barging into your professional life. And actually, Melissa and I meet like once a week now. So we've turned my rage and murderous intent into a friendship that is precious to me. Thank you so much for coming on. You all can find recordings of these and other interviews on the Corporate Underpants podcast on your favorite podcast adventure system and also on YouTube if you want the video. If you have ideas for future guests, if you have questions or comments, please share. And I hope to see you next time on Corporate Underpants. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay, bye, everybody. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Corporate Underpants, and there's lots more to come. If you have any projects that you need my help on, if you're interested in coaching to become a senior product leader through understanding alignment in politics, or if you're interested in any of the classes or books that I'm developing, please visit my website, adlininc.com, and get in touch.